Hello, welcome to Daily Charge with Daniels. We're looking at lessons from the life of David, and today we're looking at do not frustrate the grace of God. Do not frustrate the grace of God. Now, First Samuel chapter 13, verse 13 to 14 says, "For now would the Lord have established thy kingdom upon Israel forever, but now thy kingdom shall not continue. The Lord has sought him a man after his own heart, and as the Lord has commanded him to be captain over his people, because thou hast not kept that which the Lord commanded thee." So this was Samuel telling Saul after Saul had disobeyed God, and Samuel was telling him that because of what you've done, the Lord has he said, because of what you've done, you have prevented God's plan coming to pass. So when the Bible says here, it said, "The Lord, for now would the Lord have established thy kingdom upon Israel forever," meaning that the lineage of kingship would have continued from the line of Saul. But God was saying that because of what you've done, you have stopped it. He said, "For the kingdom would have continued, but now God has sought somebody else." So because of what Saul did, God had to seek out David, and God had to seek out David. So now let me read. He said, "The example of Saul can serve as a warning to us all." We need to learn from Saul. We need to learn from the story of Saul. And that's one of the reasons why we're doing this, to learn from the people in the Bible, to learn from the life of David. And in learning from the life of David, we're understanding that David wasn't God's first choice. Saul was God's first choice. But because Saul disobeyed God, God had to seek another man. And it's a warning for every one of us. He said, the Lord has a plan for each of us that is by grace. So God's plan for our lives is by grace, not because we deserve it, not because we merit it, not because we are the most qualified. It's a function of grace. When God chose Saul, it wasn't just because Saul was the best man. Now, Saul had some physical attribute that God could use, but it was a function of God's grace. Now, it is not based on our performance, our choices, God's plan for us, but we do have to cooperate with that plan. So even though God is not choosing us just because of we are the best, but we need to understand that we need to cooperate with God's plan for our lives. Now, even though we don't deserve our God-given destiny, there are things we can do that will hinder or stop it from coming to pass in our lives. Just the way Saul hindered God's plan from coming to pass in his life, there are things we can do to hinder God's plan from coming to our life. So we need to take heed and beware. You can't just take the grace of God, His blessing or His calling on your life for granted. You can't just take it for granted. You see, you need to persevere. Paul understood and cooperated with this truth. Now, Paul said in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 9 to 10, he said, "For I am the least of the apostles, but by the grace of God, I am what I am." So Paul could understand that, hey, I'm not Paul because I was the best person to be chosen. He said, I was the least among the apostles, but by God's grace, I am what I am. So he was saying that I acknowledge that is a function of God's grace. And because of that, Paul had to not just only acknowledge, but live with that understanding. You see, you need to understand that your blessing, the blessing of God upon your life, the ability to do the things you're doing, the things God has chosen you to do, is not a function of your performance. It is a function of God's grace. But you need to understand that you can't spoil it. You can spoil God's plan. And that is why we need to learn from the story of Saul. Now, Paul's calling was by God's grace. He didn't deserve it. But Paul went on to say, and look at what Paul said. He said, "And his grace which was bestowed upon me was not in vain." That is to say that we can make the grace of God in vain in our lives. We can thwart God's plan. We can frustrate it. Paul said his grace was not in vain in my life. In other words, God can give grace to you, but you can void it. He said the Lord has a plan for your life, but you can invalidate it. His grace was not in vain. Paul said, "But I labored more abundantly than they all. Say, yet not I, but the grace of God which was with me." So Paul was saying that, hey, I acknowledge the grace of God upon my life, but I did not allow that grace to be in vain. And because of that, I labored much more than they all. I want to encourage you. What is the grace that God has given to you? What is the blessing? What is the uniqueness God has given to you? Do not let it be in vain. Do not let it be in vain. Just as Paul did. Paul said, "I labored much more than they all." Labor to make use of it and let it be a blessing to the world. I believe that you've learned from this. You can say a word of prayer that, Lord, help me not to frustrate the grace of God that you've given unto me, and let it be your meditation all through today. Thank you for listening. Feel free to share, like this video, comment. I'd like to see your comment on the video because it helps the video to the algorithms for it to get to other people. So please comment on it. If you just to say thank you, please say thank you. If it's if you can share the video. If you're not following me on my various platforms, I will encourage you to please follow me. Thank you for listening. God bless you, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.